Hey everyone, welcome back. In the previous video, we went ahead and created a simple animation using the animation graph editor and just some basic principles of animation. We made this very simple bouncing ball that starts high, but then gets progressively weaker and weaker before it eventually just stops on the ground completely. In this video, we're going to discuss how to properly submit this kind of work. You may think that a render is going to cut it. I'm going to go ahead and just set up a render at this point. You would think a render would be enough, but as you can see, a render is just an image, a still image that does not capture the actual animation of our work here. If you wanted to render your animations, you would actually have to go into, let's go to rendering. You would actually have to use batch rendering here, which is something that we're not going to cover in this class. It's something that future classes will cover, but you would have to use batch rendering to render out an animation, which basically takes a render image of every single frame, at which point you would combine them together, and that's how you make your video. But that's something you cover in another class. We're going to go through the simple solution of exporting out our work here, which is not actually a render at all. It is going to be a Playblast. It's going to be a video file of our viewport. And so the first thing you want to do is make sure you jump into your render settings. Make sure that you have your presets set to HD 1080 so that the width and the height are correct. At which point, you want to also activate the resolution mask that we first covered way back in week 4. We want to make sure we cover what needs to be covered here. And everything is captured as should be captured. Perfect. So that is what we want to work with. I'm going to turn that off now. Next up, we have to decide what frames to render, and that is going to be dependent on what you have down here in your timeline. You want to make sure you don't have unnecessary frames. So in this case, I don't want up to 120, because in this case, what's going to actually be recorded for my Playblast is going to be the actual animation, and then just nothing, and then finally the animation starts again. So you want to make sure that you have, all of your actual animation and nothing else here, like I do. That way the video can loop effectively and quickly without any dead time. Okay, fantastic. We have our lights enabled. We have our grid hidden. Let's go ahead and discuss what the Playblast is. So as I mentioned a couple of times now, the Playblast is a recording of your viewport. It is not actually a render at all. It's going to be a recording of whatever you see in the viewport, which means that right now, this is going to show up in your Playblast, which you shouldn't want that to show up in your Playblast. What you want to do instead is go over to Show right here. You want to select None. That's going to make everything disappear. But now if we go back to Show, and we go to Viewport, and we just check off polygons, we can see that icon for the light is gone, but all the important stuff, i.e. the ball, the ground, and the shadows remain, which is perfect. This is exactly what we want. This is all that we want. We don't want anything else showing up in our Playblast except for this. And when done, just go back under Show and select All. Also, make sure when you're about to do a Playblast, you use your resolution gate to figure out what area is actually going to show up in your Playblast, but then you turn this off, because this, again, it's a recording of your viewport, so this will show up in your Playblast if you keep it on. So make sure you turn this off once you're ready to go. When you are ready to go, you're going to want to right-click on your timeline, the timeline where we did all the animations in the previous video. Going to right-click on it. We're going to see this final icon down here called Playblast. We want the settings for this. At this point, we're going to reset the settings so that we can see everything by default. Format is fine. We're not going to mess with this. Encoding is fine. We're not going to mess with this. The quality, we're not going to mess with this either, but you can if you want to be aware that messing with this makes the file size bigger. We'll discuss that once we actually make a file. Let's go ahead and make this a little bigger so we can see everything. Underneath quality, we have display size. This is the first thing you want to change right here. It currently says from window. You don't want this. You want from render settings. That way that 1920 by 1080 that we had set up here for render settings will be the size of the video. Next up, you want to scale to 1. You want to save to file. going to save it over to the desktop and call this ball bounce test. And now I'm just going to click on Playblast. Give it a moment. It's running through the recording. And there it is. There is our video file. I currently have a VLC turned on, so that's why. Let's go ahead and minimize Maya. We don't need it anymore. Let's take a look at our desktop, and here is the file that we created. This is the Playblast that we made, the AVI file that we made. Let's go ahead and double click and open just to make sure. Yep, there it is. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and take a look at the properties for this. Something you won't be doing that often, but starting now, you probably should. So let's go ahead and look at the properties for this ball bounce test. We can see the size is currently 480 megabytes. That is right below the amount that Moodle allows for file submissions. Obviously, in this specific case, you can take the file as is and submit it, and it'll probably be okay. Although I don't really like .avi files, so we're going to discuss how to compress and convert this anyway for convenience, and just because it's going to be a better type of file to work with. If you have a file that's greater than 500 megabytes, or you just don't like AVI files, because I don't like AVI files, we have to convert this and compress this. And the way to do that, I would normally use a program like Adobe Premiere Pro, because I have a subscription for that. I use that regularly. I like Adobe Premiere Pro, but you may not have Adobe Premiere Pro, because obviously that costs money. It's a subscription. So you need some sort of a free alternative. If you're on a Windows machine, then you can just go into our settings here. We're going to use Microsoft Clipchamp here. So you can just type in Champ and track it down. And we're going to open it up. And by the way, if you're a Mac user, I believe the equivalent for this program is iMovie. I think it's iMovie. And if there's something else, I'll also add that in the Moodle for you if you need it. But we'll discuss in a minute why it's important to start getting used to using other programs like this. So I'm going to create a new video. I'm just going to go ahead and drag my ball bounce video in. Give that a moment. Then I'm going to go ahead and just drag it down here. And I'm not going to do anything with it because I'm going to keep the video exactly the same as is. The whole point of this is conversion and compression, not editing. So let's go ahead and go to export. I'm going to export as a 1080p video. My ball bounce animation. I'm going to, oh, actually I didn't even have to do it here. I'm just going to save my computer. I'm going to save it as a desktop. My ball bounce animation. Enter. Let's minimize and see if it did create something. It did. We have, not only do we have now an MP4 file, which is much better, a superior kind of video file, I think. But if we go ahead and hover over, we see that instead of it being almost 500 megabytes, or almost half a gig in size, that it is now only 243 kilobytes. Infinitely smaller, as you can see here. And if we open it up, with none of the quality of the video sacrificed. So, to review, Playblasts are a great way of very, very quickly generating a video of your viewport, which if you're doing animation is very, very important to do. Obviously, once you do this, the Playblast generates a massive file, a file that is really, really big and only gets bigger the more frames you have for your timeline. In our case, it was already almost at the Moodle limit of 500. In your case, depending on the kind of animation you do, now or in the future, it may exceed 500 megabytes, in which case you have to go out of your way to take your AVI file and put it into another program like Adobe Premiere Pro, if you have a subscription for that, or if you need a free alternative, something like Microsoft Clipchamp, or if you're on Mac, something like iMovie. Take your video file in there, immediately export it, and that will compress the video. Not only will it convert it into a better file type, but it will compress the video overall, which is what you want. This is a Maya Foundations course, so obviously the main requirement for the course is you being able to use Autodesk Maya, but I'm introducing this kind of stuff to you now because moving forward, you are going to have to use other programs. You're not just going to be limited to working within Maya. You're going to be using other programs. Eventually, you may be using 3ds Max or Blender or Mudbox or ZBrush for sculpting purposes, or Unity or Unreal as game engines, or Photoshop or GIMP or Paint if you want to do some texturing work, or take your UVs into another program and paint over them, or Clipchamp or iMovie or Premiere Pro in order to compress and safely submit video files of Playblast that you initially make, or Visual Studio for coding, or OBS and Audacity for recording purposes, Substance Painter and Designer for advanced texturing purposes, Houdini for procedural generated assets and effects, Discord or Slack for communication. The point is, you are going to be using a multitude of programs. Being a game developer, being able to create interactive media or media in general, means that you have to be able to jump from one program to another comfortably. In big studios, you can expect to be working in for doing one specific kind of task, maybe using just one specific kind of program. But in smaller studios, or as you're starting out and learning everything, you are expected to be able to put on many hats and be able to jump from one program to another one, back to back to back, really quickly and really efficiently. So I'm just introducing the concept to you now that you're going to have to be jumping back and forth between multiple different kinds of programs, and eventually eventually including version control as well, with something like GitHub or Plastic as version control solutions, which is something that's way down the line, but something that you also need to be ready for and ready to get used to. Jumping from one program to another is really, really important in this kind of work. So this course has been just teaching you about Maya, but I'm also throwing it out there that you have to start getting comfortable with the fact that you're going to need to jump from program to program to program in a short amount of time. That's all I've got. That little spiel on how you need to be ready to jump across multiple different programs at a moment's notice. Thank you very much for watching. This has been week 10 material. Next week, we're going to focus in on our final topic, which is going to be an introduction to retopology, as well as some extra videos, some external extra videos on other stuff that you can do with Maya, like particles and the Arnold renderer and that kind of good stuff. So that's all I've got. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this basic introduction to animation and creating playblasts and compressing those videos down. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.